So, Bill, at some point, you might want to show me what you did there, brother, so that. Did you? Okay, so we're still going streaming the live. We're on green or whatever. Okay. That's why I've been making the go live delay till last minute. Literally, I think it's 8:59. It's supposed to go. We got 1 minute, just in case that happened. Groovy. We're all live. Thanks, brother. Good morning. Good to see y'all this morning. Have your Romans outline ready to go? Hit the ground running. Good morning, Marie. A lot of y'all know who Red is. Richard, he prefers Red, actually. His mom says Richard. Good. See, I like Richard, too. I know. I was about to. Thank you. My next step was that she turned this Red's mom's turns 82 today, so we're excited about that. Happy birthday today, 82. 82. Okay, Romans chapter 3. I'm going to start where we ended last week. I like to do that each time to overlap a little bit, get our juices flowing, and allows me a chance to correct everything I said from last week. No, ma'am, not on me. I don't. I can make some more copies. She's very gracious. Jen's like that. Romans chapter 3. Paul's making a long argument against a probably pretend Jewish interlocutor because it's a big deal to say that God wants to make people right apart from the Mosaic law. And Paul's making a big ado about it, but he has to. He's making a big deal about that. So at the end of chapter 3, I want to talk a little couple things. There's a concept of a word we don't use much these days, but they use in the ancient world quite a bit. And this is where this study, kind of like Revelation, is where we could spend so much time exploring. I mean, there's so much work done on it. At the same time, I'm not trying to do a year-long graduate level course on this either. I'm trying to do this perfect balance, which I'm sure I'm failing at. But there's certain words I want to make sure you hear that we describe and understand as best we can. And one of those words is the word righteousness or righteous. The Greek word in your translation typically says things like righteousness or righteous, make right. And sometimes it'll say in a verb form, justify. It's the same Greek word, dikaio, D-I-K, and then the verb is dikaio. And so we don't say the word, I wish we did because it'd make more sense. So let's say Will is righteous. Well, how did he become righteous? Well, I righteousized him. I righteousized him. We don't say that word because we don't have the word like that. We say I justified him. So we change words. And the reason why we do that is because, who knows? Righteous comes from the old Anglo-Saxon word right-wise. It means to make something in the right, centered straight in the right. Justify comes from the Latin version of that word. So Latin's older, iustu, which means to put in the right. So Anglo-Saxon, Old English, or Latin, they're translating the same word, which is dikaio in Greek. And that is to make right. So to make right or to be in the right has two major meanings. Does that make sense so far? To be in the right, justified. That if you go to Microsoft Word or something and you click justify, what it means is all the lyrics and stuff get centered right in the middle. Justify in the middle, standard. There's a plumb line we used to say. And So to be made right is used in two major ways throughout the Bible, to be in the right. On the one way to be in the right is in a forensic or legal sense. To be in the right means they are vindicated, acquitted, saved. So someone is exonerated, vindicated, in the right. So the defense attorney says, when I told you, didn't do it. Will did not murder that guy. He is shown to be righteous, vindicated. That's what we're hoping and praying for, right? That's what we're hoping for a good outcome for you. Conversion, that too. So being in the right has a forensic, legal, being in the right. Righteous size, justified means I'm in the right. I have been found to be vindicated, righteous in that sense. That's the forensic way of righteousness, righteous, justice. The other way righteousness is used is in a moral category. That is an ethical category. Righteous means I'm behaving according to the right. I'm acting or living according to the right. The ancient Greeks used to say, out pedipateo, I'm walking in the rightness. And so Paul even says that sometimes, walk. And so in normal Christianese, we'll say, how, not so much here, but when I grew up, it was, how's your Christian walk coming? Well, that's from the New Testament as well, walking in the faith. Ancient philosophers use that as in, because the philosophers would walk around, their students would follow them around. They would say, follow me as I walk. So righteous means to be in the right, to be found to be in the right, and it's used in two major categories. They are what? Good. Legal, forensic. That is, I'm shown to be in the right because I'm innocent. I've been vindicated. I have been acquitted. I'm exonerated in the right. The other way righteous is in the what category? The moral, ethical category. I'm behaving right, and it depends on the verse you read to decide which one is there. Paul tends to lean towards forensic. Now, this is very much debated in scholarship, but this is my view, and I think this is the most persuasive view, that most of the time when Paul uses the word righteous in the right, he means it more in the sense of a legal forensic sense. You're in the right. But there are times he seems to mean ethical. But you go to places like the book of James, and 2 Peter, and other places where, and other times Paul uses in Galatians and so forth, he means something more like an ethical. And he kind of goes back and forth. So that's one thing that can cause confusion for us, is because you're thinking, in what way is he using the term? Does that, I mean, it is. To me, it's a little confusing at times. Sometimes a lot confusing. So one way is righteous can mean two different categories. The other thing that confuses me is because they don't say righteous eyes. They start changing the words all the time. So if Johnny's righteous and he's been justified, I think I'm bringing up two different concepts. But in Greek, I am not bringing up two different concepts. So this is why I like to use the word, and this is, you can have permission. When you get to heavenly realm, you'll say, David said do it, whatever. In your Bible, instead of put justify for the verb, justify, mark it out and put righteous eyes. Righteous eyes. You might want to say to make righteous. That's fine, to make righteous. I like righteous eyes. Put in the right. Put in the right. Righteous eyes. Because the justify, today in modern English, another problem is when I say justify, it usually means give an excuse for my bad behavior. Don't justify yourself. But technically, that's not what it means, give an excuse for bad behavior. It means, forensic style means I'm being shown that I'm in the right. I'm vindicated. I'm in the right. I'm exonerated. So when Paul says the righteousness of God, he seems to be meaning, technically speaking, that which the character or attribute of God that shows he's in the right. He's in the right. He's incorrect. He's in the centered. He's ready to go. He's in the right. Does that make sense so far? Let me pause there because this is a biggie. Because Paul, I've been trying to, over the study, unpack certain concepts as we go versus the first 5 weeks, do a bunch of definitions. I'll keep dropping little bombs here and there. But this is one. So let me pause there. Are there any questions or comments about righteousness or righteous eyes? Okay, one last time for the late people. So when Paul says righteousness, he means put in the right. And being the right can be used in a forensic legal sense, exonerated, vindicated, sometimes even the word saved. Righteousness can mean a moral, ethical category, to behave according to the right. Those are two different things. But the verb, so if I'm off center, the verb to put me in the right is righteous eyes. But we don't use that word in English, so we say justify. Make centered, make right, justified. Paul likes those verbs a lot. So let's go ahead in verse 21 one more time. So let's reread this part. We ended it last week. Now thinking about those concepts. But now, in his present time, since Jesus has come, the rightness of God, God's righteousness, has been shown and manifested apart from the Mosaic law. Now, although the Mosaic Law and the prophets, they bear witness to it, that is, there's precedent, it pointed that way, sure. But the righteousness of God, God's rightness, through faith, probably means the faith of Jesus Christ for all who believe. For there's no distinction. And that's the big deal. There's no distinction is what Paul means, probably what he means as my gospel. His emphasis on this exact thing, there's no distinction. He will unpack that in Galatians and say there is neither male and female, there is neither slave nor free, Greek or Gentile. That is, there's no distinction, that they're all made righteous through that. But verse 23, he says it differently. He says, since all have sinned, he means Jew and Gentile, and they fall short of God's glory. He probably means they fall short of being in the presence of God. That is, they don't deserve to be there. It might also allude to an old, a Jewish concept of the time period, that Adam, the original Adam, had a glory about him. Glory literally means bright white light. Doxa means bright white light. And it became a metaphor for something like fame. And it can be used like the weight of something. So someone's glory comes in the room, or they say they're glorious. Sometimes we use that in English sometimes, maybe like at least in my experience, on someone's wedding day, she looked glorious. She wasn't literally beaming light like a sun. It's a metaphor for she was beaming. Or they might say they were beaming with excitement. That means they're glowing. That's glory. That's glory. So that's the idea here. So it might mean that you fall short. We don't deserve to be in God's glorious presence. It could also mean that you fall short of the original way humans were in some Jewish stories that Adam himself glowed. Whatever it is, they ain't right anymore. They ain't right anymore. Verse 24. They are not justified. They are what? They are righteousized. They are made righteous. They are made righteous. They are made centered. They're made right by His grace as a what? Gift. And that concept of gift, doron, is a fundamental concept in Paul's theology. It is a gift. To be made in the right is a gift. You have been righteousized. You've been made right as a gift. Well, that gift cost him something. And what was the cost? So the redemption is the word when a slave has been set free, which is in the Messiah Jesus. That's what it cost. The gift cost him everything. It cost you nothing. So that's how you got that. You were made righteousized. You were put in the right. God shows how He's so right by putting you in the right because of what Jesus has done for you as a gift. Now, verse 25, whom God, the Father, He put forth as a mercy seat by His blood to be received. It's through faith, So when you receive that gift as a faith, it acts as atonement. Now, this is where I paused last week very quickly. The Greek word of 25, elastelion, can mean expiation, propitiation. Let me pause there for a second and just kind of skip those words. We just don't use those words anymore. We don't. And so sometimes that Greek word is translated mercy seat. He's referring to an object, and I referenced this one time on a Good Friday sermon when I first got here. And I know you have that memorized, but just in case, let me go over that one more time. What? Thank you. Thank you, Red. The Ark of the Covenant. See, extra crowns in heaven. So the Ark of the Covenant, this big device in which the Ten Commandments lie, and they were inside here, and on the top of that part, inside the Holy of Holies, the top of the lid was called in Greek the elastelion, something in Hebrew right now it's eluding me. But anyway, the point is that's sometimes translated mercy seat. And once a year in Leviticus 18 is what's called Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. And the priest would come in with blood from a sacrificed animals. He'd come in and he would splatter this device, this big instrument here that would use to hold the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. He was splattered with blood. And that blood in the ancient world in this time period acts like a detergent. It shows that something is being cleansed. And when he sprayed the top of that lid with maybe kind of like a paintbrush, probably something like that, where he got blood, it's a bloody mess. I keep wanting to say it. I'm sorry, it's just for Greg. Thank you, Greg. You awake? Okay. A bloody mess. You like puns? Okay. Anyway, so the blood goes everywhere and acts like a detergent, but it also not just ritually cleanses the spot. It acts like a place of atonement. That is, the blood on this altar in this holy of holy spots where God Himself reigns, it's a sign that our relationship has been atoned, made at oneness. So Paul is using an image that Jews would have known, Gentiles not so much, but Jews would have. He's saying Jesus did that for you. It's like that. The cross where Jesus died is like that mercy seat. It's like the lid. And the blood that was from the animals is more like the blood from Jesus. So how do you know God is in the right? He's a righteous God. He's centered. How do we know that? Paul's saying, because he sent Jesus as a gift for you, a gift, apart from the Mosaic law, just a gift. And that his blood acts like that Old Testament thing we all believed in is a big, big deal that made us all right with God. Now, the Yom Kippur is a big deal because that was the one event in Jewish high holy days that ideally gave forgiveness or atonement for Jews across Israel that were unintentional sins. The idea is that the group was occupied. So Paul likes this analogy because it's talking about big groups of people. And is received through faith. That's how I get the gift. I receive it. So it's not an act of something I earned. It's just I receive it. I like to use an analogy. If someone comes up, the owner of Disney World, and says, here's a golden ticket. You get access to everything. You can sleep in the castle as long as you want. You can do whatever you want to. Well, how much does it cost me? Nothing. They cost me everything. It cost me billions of dollars to build this. But if you just take this ticket, if you receive this, you get free access. And that's what Paul means to have faith. He means to have a positive response toward and do something about it. You can't just go, I receive it, and then go home. Receive it means I receive it positively, and then I do something to be a response to that gift. And he says this was to show God's in the right. God's righteous. Because in his divine forbearance, he had passed over former sins. And this is, everything's debated, but I won't say that because I'll say it all the time. Well, this is debated. Everything is. But he probably means something along the lines of, God had to do something like this because he had not dealt with sin completely yet. God had to do something because God hadn't dealt with sin completely yet. All for centuries, he used a sacrificial system, but sin wasn't really dealt with yet. To show that God's in the right, he's not some evil, pathetic, or neutral God. He's righteous. He's always in the right, both ethically and then judicially. And so something's got to be done to demonstrate that sin matters. We don't like that concept today. If I can preach just for a second, because if you go out into the real world, whence we can, and we're going to live throughout the world the week, they do not like that idea. Hell is very offensive to them. The idea that you might be punished is very offensive to them. I'm trying to encourage you, if you're here, I'm assuming you're a Christian or trying to be and so forth. I'm trying to encourage you. We simply disagree with them. Respectfully, we simply disagree. And we all know deep inside, even people, BLM and over, everyone believes in this concept called justice. But we disagree upon which justice should be applied, but everyone believes in it, which is why they use terms like taking away a woman's right. That sounds unjust, and that's bad. Those kinds of things, it appeals to a sense of justice. Because we all believe that justice is good, to take it away is bad, and people who take it away should be punished. This idea that people ought to be punished for committing crimes, in the Christian worldview, we say, comes from God. You get the idea that people there ought to be consequences to crimes. And so in the Christian worldview, we go, of course that's true. Well, if God just said it doesn't matter, nothing matters ever. Imagine that. People come to court, serial killers, murderers, pedophiles, whatever, pick your favorite thing, normal things, horrible things, and they go, this big case, and the judge goes, yeah, you're cool, go ahead. You go, what? No one would leave the courtroom besides the person convicted, who was going to be convicted. No one would leave the courtroom going, you're right, it's not a big deal, he's right. That judge, he's a cool guy. I like him. He lets everybody off the hook no matter what they did. No matter who, really, anybody? Yeah, Hitler. Yeah, he's like, that's cool. See you, man. Hey, it was your truth. You didn't like the Jews. I feel you. I don't like these other people. High five. That's a righteous judge. Nobody would say that. No, they would overturn, the country would burn if they got off the hook. If the people who did 9/11 were found on trial and the Supreme Court said, that's cool. Hey, who am I to judge? Think about it. They're right. They're right. Those are good judges, righteous judges. See, it's gibberish. Nobody thinks that unless they're the ones on trial. Everybody on trial wants mercy, not righteousness. And Paul understood this. The Jews understood this because they got this from God himself. And Christians are supposed to still understand this, that sin is serious and has to be dealt with. Little footnote, one last little sermon point, and that is one of the most difficult things in my own personal spiritual life and walk and discipleship, one of my most difficult struggles in my own life, and one of the most difficult struggles for me to help try to articulate as a Christian disciple maker for decades, is how to emphasize, as Paul seemed to struggle too with, how to emphasize God is incredibly gracious, but you should never sin because it's extremely serious. But he sure is merciful. But do not sin ever. Don't do it. But he sure loves you and he's gracious. And I feel like C.S. Lewis on Works and Faith, he says, it's like asking which with a blade of scissors is more important. I just think they go together. And one thing that helps me remind myself that God's grace is so important and his mercy is so real as I look to Jesus and his death on the cross. When I think about how serious sin is, how profoundly bad it is, I look to Jesus on the cross. He's the common denominator. And that's Paul's point. God is righteous, and something had to be shown to demonstrate that it matters. Sin matters. It matters. There should be consequences. And he's saying, look at Jesus. Jesus dealt perfectly with that concept of both mercy, a free act of grace, and he hadn't dealt with sins fully yet, and now it's time to deal with it. And that's why he says in verse 26, it was to prove at the present time, that is, after Jesus, that he himself is righteous and that he righteouses him who has the faith of Jesus. And he means faith of Jesus. So it demonstrates God is righteous and that he can make will righteous. When you have the faithfulness of Jesus, demonstrates I'm going all in. And if we have that faith that he had, he puts you in the right. And it cost him everything. It cost Jesus everything. That's how awesome he is. Something's got to deal, you got to deal with sin. Now, he does not explain here, he hardly ever explains ever, frankly, in my opinion, exactly how that works. I'm going to talk more about that in Romans 5 and in 6 and clear up what I think are misunderstandings. But Paul will try to explore in what way did Jesus take upon God the Father's wrath or consequences of sin? In what way? And a little foreshadowing, Paul says that God crucified sin in the flesh of Jesus. He doesn't say he beat up Jesus like a whipped old dog. He had to beat somebody. Someone's going to get beaten. I'm just going to beat. I just smell some abusing coming on. Oh, there's Jesus. Let's get him. A lot of people have that vision. That's what happened. That's not what happened. So in some way, in some fashion, so far he is not explained, Jesus' death acts like the atoning seat of the Ark of the Covenant where people are made right with God. Why not just forgive everybody? Because that means sin doesn't matter. Why not just say, what difference does it make? Because it would mean God's not righteous. Well, that's not true. He could just, if he wanted to, yes, if he wanted to. He doesn't want to because that would demonstrate that sin doesn't matter. And it does matter. And he's not righteous if that's the case. And Jews would say everyone knows God's righteous. And the righteous judge acts righteously. Let me use a different analogy. It's as if the judge this guy comes in, let's say he's a man, I come in, I'm the guy, I come in, I'm convicted of all these crimes, I'm being accused of all these crimes. And they're horrible crimes, it's obvious, all this evidence against me, it's very obvious I did it. And the judge says, all right, here's the deal. And he goes, coon, you get life in prison. And then I go, oh my goodness, the judge stands up, takes off his robe and says, now come, I'll go do it for you. Because the judge is my father. So there's still a sentence. Because I'm demonstrating what you did was bad and wrong, and I'm not a righteous judge if I don't declare this as guilty. You are guilty, but I'll pay the price for your guilt. And so that's what Paul means. He's shown to be righteous by doing something with it. Okay. No extra charge for that sermon. I want to make sure that sinks in, though. Any question or comments? Yes, ma'am. Good question. Good question. So how does sin, how does it relate to man's law? There are Christians have, two major views. Some that say it's directly related and some say no, it ain't. And so My view is typically it's no, it ain't. But okay, so the Christians who say that humans' law is related to the crime in the kingdom of God, they're related. They'll go to texts like Romans 13, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. That is, if the government says you got to do it, you got to do it. So, for example, if the speed limit says 40 and I go 41, you have just sinned because you break the laws of the land. You're supposed to obey the government. The government says don't do that. You did it. So you sinned against God. And there are Christians who very much believe that. There might be Christians in the room who believe that. And so they have to ask God's forgiveness for sinning. And Bonnie said, bless her, Lord. That's a view. And I've met Christians who very much believe that. And they put their cruise control on 40 miles per hour. They don't go because they'll say, no, I can't sin. I think that's certainly possible. I don't, and I respectfully understand they're trying to take what Paul says about the government seriously. I respect that too. My view is different. My view is that I don't think that's Paul's point in Romans 13. I don't think every single law that a human makes is a moral issue. So, for example, it's illegal to drive on the left side of the road in America. Well, I think if I drive on the left side of the road for a little bit, even out in the middle of the country road, where you've been sinning. I don't think so. I think that's arbitrary. I don't think it's arbitrary which side it is, but we need a rule so that we don't all smash into each other. I think the rule helps order from chaos, that's true, but I don't think it's a sin to drive on the left side of the road. So the answer is you get to decide, and there's all the books on this issue to decide that, and all kinds of good essays, and what do you say? Yeah, so the second question, is it right for a judge to condemn someone? In that sense, in my view, is absolutely, yeah, it is a right for a judge or a jury. And I was talking to someone today about this. She was concerned about being on jury duty because she said, I thought we weren't supposed to judge. And I said, I'm so glad you care about that because I think Christians ought to care about those things. When Jesus says in Matthew 7, don't judge lest you be judged. For the measure of what you judge, the judge blah, blah. First take a 2 by 4 your own eye, then get the speck out of your brother's eye. Don't throw your pearl before swine. So Matthew 7, 1 through 5. Well, I'm convinced in Matthew 7, 1 through 5, Jesus is saying that do not judge people by a standard you do not apply to yourself. I do not think Jesus was talking about a legal system that did not exist in this time period. So if I go to court today and I'm the judge himself or the jury, if I declare someone, I'm not declaring that they deserve to go to hell. I would be deciding, I think based on the evidence given, there's enough evidence to demonstrate they have broken this rule according to our state laws or the Constitution. Whether or not it makes them guilty before God is back to that first question. Are you guilty before God because you broke a law of the country? That's where Christians are divided. That's the first question. So, but if I'm in court and I say, there seems to be enough evidence to demonstrate that Will did kill that guy, I'm going to go back to that over and over until he finally repents. There's enough evidence that Will murdered that guy. Well, I'm not saying he deserves hell. I'm just saying it seems like there's enough evidence they made their case. The prosecutor made their case. But I'm not judging him to hell. I'm also not judging hypocritically. I don't say, well, I don't do bad things. That's why I can do this. No, that's not my role there either. So I don't think Jesus in Matthew 7 has anything to do with the current legal system in America. So can a judge judge? I think so, according to the laws of this land. Oh, good. So how does Jesus and God the Father view that judgment? Well, last time they talked to me, I'm kidding. I don't know. They have not revealed to me what they think about that. They haven't. My own view is that, and of course, I can be wrong about everything. My own view is that I don't think they care that much. I don't think so. I don't think they care that much. I think what they care about is whether or not we're living into the rules, the precepts, the morality that Jesus instructed. My own view is I don't think God gives a rip if I speed to 41 miles an hour. I don't think he gives a rip. I think he cares very much if I love my enemies, if I pray for those who persecute me, if I forgive people. I do. So I stick with what I think Jesus taught the most in those principles. David, yeah, but it's a sin to set a bad example to go 41. And I'll listen to those conversations, and I might find it persuasive. Just my own view is right now this morning, this year, so far in my life in research, I don't think God cares. I don't think so. I think if I go to the Philippines and hear what their trial is, or I go to China or North Korea, does God support? But they're all governments. Go to Russia, they're a government. We say, well, Paul said, Romans 13. See, the problem is it works forever. Romans 13, the government that Paul praises in Romans 13 is the beast in Revelation 13. So it's fueled by Satan. So I don't find it persuasive that Romans 13 covers everything, and then you smuggle in Americans a Christian country and Romans 13, then you have this powerhouse and their view that everything they say is just and righteous. And I fundamentally disagree with that because they're humans and they're not Jesus. But I'll get way off track. Yes, ma'am. One last thing, and I'll. Hmm, hmm. Right. So what if someone is convicted and they get the death penalty? Do they have the right to do that? That's also a great question. There's an enormous amount of books on that topic. Uh, so, uh, so my see this is where it's fundamentally a different question for me is I would say the church, capital C. Does the church have the right to condemn people and kill them? My view is no, no. Can a state do that? Sure, they can. Sure. It doesn't make it right. That's right. So do they have the moral grounds for that? I would say, well, no, they don't have the. They may not. Then I would say is they need to act according to their constitution. But see, this is where, this is where I do get worked up. I won't get worked up. Just breathe. I fundamentally disagree with people who think that the state is synonymous with the church. I fundamentally disagree. We have different values. I want the state to act according to their constitution, and I'll decide whether I live there. For a society, I agree, but the state is not the church. And so while the church thinks the state is the church, and they're always mad at the states, mad, 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 you need to change your ways, the church is a dirty, nasty bride. We got to get our house in order, in my view. We got to get our bride. That's the revelation. We're the bride of Christ. And so we're trying so busy to get this dirty state cleaned up. We're a big fat mess. So I get worked up about that. So it's a great question. I don't have the definitive answer on that. I don't. I do. What I'm most interested in is, can the church do that? It's hard for me to think the church would sentence someone to death when I'm supposed to love my enemies and care for those. But I think it's a different role than what the state does. Yes, sir. Hmm. Completely agree. So if I'm going, if a police officer pulls me over and he or she says, you got to go to jail because you were speeding or you used a ticket, and I go, no, the Lord said, yeah, I would never do that. Right, because as an American citizen, by my living here and paying my taxes, oh, I pay them. Okay, anyway. So I pay my tax. That's right. It's another thing in Romans 13. He's talking, don't stop paying your taxes. You got to keep paying your taxes. Anyway, so my view is that by living here and by paying my taxes and so forth, I'm agreeing to the contract of the Constitution and the local state laws. I'm agreeing to them. And I expect you to agree to them too. I expect you to drive on the right side of the road and me to drive on the right side of the road and in general to obey the speed limit. That's right. But to me, that's because of a legal country thing. I don't get mad at them for a second for giving me a ticket. I don't like that I got it. I might disagree with their conclusion. But if that's clearly I broke the law, yeah, I deserve that. That's fine. My own view is theologically, I don't think I've sinned. I don't think God's going, oh, that's why I died on the cross for you, speed demon. Some do think that. That's fine. I just don't find that persuasive. I don't think one of the things for which I'm forgiven is speeding. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. He goes, David, remember all those times? Of what? No, it was the speedometer. I mean, I don't think that's going to. But do I deserve? Yes, I deserve it. And my own view as an American citizen is that it very much matters what the Constitution said because that's our basis of our entire society. And as Americans, we have national sovereignty to do that. That makes sense to me. That's why I want Supreme Court to make decisions based on their understanding of the Constitution. It has to be a governing document. The church, however, in my view, is not driven by the Constitution. I don't care what they said. I care what Jesus said. And so if they go together, sure, I'll go by the Constitution. Sure, sure. But the second what they declare goes against my understanding of the kingdom of God, you're done. I'm done with you. My relationship with America is contingent. And it is always contingent. Not with Jesus. That's not contingent. He stays when you go. Period. So the second you're asking me, it might be legal to go kill babies in their womb. Yep, it's legal. And maybe they declare the Constitution allows that. Okay, cool. Not in a billion years. But I understand, according to the Constitution, I got you. Yep, not in a billion years. No, you got to go do it. Oh, then you're just mistaken. You're just mistaken. We're going to kill you if you don't. We'll cancel you. Okay, I'm not going to do it. But the Constitution says. It sure does. Or whatever your interpretation is. You're contingent. And the early Christians prove that. They were killed at the stake all the time for saying, no, we won't go all in with you. Good questions. I probably didn't answer hardly anything. There are good books on that topic. Does that help at all? Anyway, yes, ma'am. Jody. I think I understand you. So, like, even Adam and Eve, God does the judging. God does the judging, and God takes our sin in consideration. Yes. Yeah. Correct. That's right. So if I'm in a courtroom and I say someone is guilty, I'm not, again, back to my way I said at least, I'm not sending them to hell. I'm not God. I don't have a clue what, they might be a Christian. Now, they might have murdered someone yesterday, like but Will did, and they was like, but now I gave my life to Jesus. And God said, well, then you're forgiven. So I'm not condemning them to hell. I'm just saying, based on the evidence you had, it does look like you did this. In that sense, it seems like you're guilty of committing the crime on the statutes of Illinois law that you can't kill people, innocent people, except babies, all day long. But adults, you can. You can't do that. I'm sorry. See, I just. Uh, okay, that's right. So I'm not sending them to hell. I'm not their judge. I'm absolutely, that's not at all. That's right. What God chooses, that's with everybody. God will decide that. Whew. I got other things on my plate. I'm not God. Yes, ma'am? Very good. So God, and that's a common argument that you'll learn when you get your master's degree, that they will say this. One of the arguments against it is say God can forgive, the law can't. That's right. So that's one distinction is countries can't forgive. They can't have a principle of forgiveness. If that's the case, it would be chaos. That's so one of the arguments goes. God can do that, but societies can't. Because then we'd have, I will say it, we'll have open borders. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter what you've done. Come on, and the water's just fine. And whatever you do doesn't matter. I mean, just for other countries. Here, I'm whatever, but I'm just. In other words, it won't matter what you do. It's chaos. I watched this documentary the other day on Woodstock '99 because they read it 30 years later. And man, it was horrible. Women were raped. They were drunk for 3 days straight. They were hard metal, and just doing what people do. And the people that were interviewing these people. What happened? They said, well, there were no rules, and the security was a joke. There were a bunch of teenagers with yellow T-shirts that said Peace Patrol, like they're the Paw Patrol, and they're walking around, and they're just all these stuff. People breaking legs, passing out, and I thought people are just good, aren't they? That's what it looks like to be pure human. When there's no. If everyone were forgiven, let's assume everyone was watching, and all the judge and jury were going, you shouldn't be doing that, but no one did anything about it, that's what happened. Pure carnage, because that's what humans do when they're left alone. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced they're not good. Yes, ma'am. That's good. So yeah, judgment now is a real, it is, but judgment's a cuss word now. I mean, well, they like cuss words, but it's a bad word. We don't have any bad words in society anymore besides judge. Yeah. Submit. Submit. Ephesians 5:22. Yeah. Don't forget that's the best verse. Actually, that verb's not in verse 22. That's why it's a nerd joke. It's only in 21. Submit one to another like Christ, wives to husbands. Uh-huh. I think so. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. So don't bury that grace out in the backyard. Good. That's right. Thank you for that. Thank y'all. Is it okay to move on? Is that okay? Thank you. Good points, good comments, good questions. Good stuff. I think Will's innocent. Verse 27. Well, then what becomes of the boasting? That's back to chapter 2, verse 17. He said there's no boasting. Some of you are boasting in yourself. And Paul says, what about the boasting then? Well, he's excluded. You can't do it. Not based on works of the law. Yeah, baby, I've arrived. And you can't do that. Well, then on what principle? The principle of works? No. On the principle of faith. If you ever boast about anything, it's that faith. Verse 28, for we hold that a person, a man, is righteousized by faith apart from the works of the law. Or is God the God of the Jews only? No, he's not the God of the Jews also. Yes, of course, the Gentiles also. That is to say, if a person was righteousized just through the works of the law, all the Gentiles go straight to hell. They're saying that's not true. We know that's not true. He's the God of the Gentiles too, which means it can't be just through the law. It's got to be through faith. Verse 30, since God is one, and he will righteousize the circumcised on the ground of their faith and the uncircumcised through their faith. Woo! Not the works of the law, but their faith in Jesus. Do we overthrow the law by the faith? No means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. We do it, but we do it perfectly through faith. Jesus has done it perfectly for us. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to chapter 4 unless we have any questions. Any question about that? Any comments? So Paul's point is, my gospel is there ain't no distinction, and God is righteous. He's in the right. Okay, chapter 4, verse 1. What are we going to say then about Abraham, our forefather according to the flesh? If Abraham was righteousized by works, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, or had faith in God, and it was credited to him, reckoned to him as righteousness. Let me pause there for a second. This next section, we're going to pick up next week as well. You need to understand in Genesis chapter 15, about 17, is if you remember your Abraham story, he's called to leave the land of Ur and the Chaldeans. Abraham is a Gentile. So Abraham becomes the paradigm of what a Gentile believer looks like. There are no Jews yet. They don't exist. Abraham probably lived around the year 2000 BC. So over 4,000 years ago, there are no Jews, there's no circumcision, there's no Ten Commandments, there's no law. They don't exist yet. And that's Paul's going to make a big argument on this. So far he's been a little theoretical, but now he's about to make a scriptural case to say, look, our forefather was a Gentile, and he was credited as you're righteous because he believed what God said. He put his trust in what God said. And real specific about one thing, which is you're going to have a child. Remember, he told us, so Abraham was married to a woman named Sarah, and Sarah was ancient, over her 40s. I mean, ancient. She was really, thank you for that. She was old, and she was over 90s, and he said, ain't no way. And years went by, ain't no way. And he said, trust me, you're going to have a child. And it says Genesis 15, he says, and he believed him. And God credited, that's a legal term, it's a financial term. He put credit to your account. He reckoned it. He credited him as you're being righteous. Abraham, you're in the right. Why? Because you believe me. You're going to bear a son. Now he starts doubting. He has a kid by someone else, and he hoped that it wouldn't happen. Well, I'll go this direction. That didn't work out well for him, so he comes back this direction. And the early church, by the early Judaism, by this time right before this, Jews had several Jewish documents that talked about this event of Abraham's calling. Now, this is where it matters to know a little bit of ancient history, how this is weird. In Paul's day, when Jews talked about Abraham, they did not emphasize, I'm shaking my, because none of them did this. They never emphasized Abraham for being faithful because he believed in God. They all emphasized that Abraham believed in God and did something about it. So it was his obedience, his doing something that demonstrated he was faithful. Paul's about to make the exact opposite argument. It was not because he did something, he just believed. But every Jew in the time period, Jews contemporaneous to Paul, disagree with him. They'll say, yeah, Paul, yeah, I mean, there's no law yet, but it's a shadow, it's a foreshadowing what's to come. He's going to get circumcised. Paul's about to say, but he wasn't yet. He wasn't circumcised yet. He didn't have the law yet, but yet he was called righteous because he had faith. He believed. And he's going to make an analogy between that and the early Christians. Just like that, he believed. Christians need to believe. Gentiles need to believe, not obey the law, just like Abraham. Father Abraham, thank you very much. And so that's why. Now, we're out of time now, but that's why. So I encourage you this week, if you will, read Romans chapter